and you brainstorm whenever you get all the ideas out of your mind that could go into this prompt, and you kind of narrow it down like little by little, and you choose the idea that you will end up writing about. And though that my idea might change over the course of your brainstorming, it will all eventually end up to that one idea.
Great.
It's really messy. It's just kind of like randomly just like seeing where your brain goes and just trying to, I guess that's why I call it storm, because it's just like crazy, like
So
everywhere.
many different directions.
And you just like see what you can come up with.
Okay.
Yeah, think of it as like a dump. Like even if you think the idea is bad, like just like dump everything you have into your onto your paper. Well, you can't really write it down, but think of all the different directions you can take it, no matter how you think. Like you can't judge.
Yeah. Just like taking it in many directions you can.
Okay. And when you talk about the concept of many different directions, for people that haven't done a lot of this kind of creative writing where you have a really severe time limit, how do you burn past certain ideas? With the storm that you're talking about, it really does sound like a lot of ideas. How do you know which ones to pick and choose?
Well, are you sure?
I try to start by kind of immediately narrowing down, like getting it out of the way, the ones that everyone else thought of, like the things based on like a picture that's hanging in the room because everyone else in the room saw that picture, and like the
things that are in movies. Or...
Yeah, or like the super obvious things, like just something that is clearly, that prompt is clearly that's what it's going to be. And then I also try to take it in, like try to look for like my strengths, like can I do a dramatic piece, or should I do dialogue, or should I do a funny piece, and like which of these would I be best at in this situation?
Great. So you have certain strengths that you have as writers, so you try to channel it in that direction. Have you ever had a lot of success with a prompt that you attempted that was outside your comfort zone?
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
Probably my most highly awarded prompt currently is one that I really didn't like at all. I'm not a super dialogue-y person or a super funny person. I tend to do more towards like the dark, dramatic, and this was super light, super funny, almost all propelled by dialogue, and it was the best thing I've ever written, as everyone else told me. But I really, like, that was a stretch for me. But I just told myself I'm going to go in that direction. And
What made you decide that?
Well, because I had thought through a lot of other things, and a lot of the other things that would have played to my strengths, I felt like everyone else would have that same sort of idea.
Got it.
So I just had to go with something crazy, which worked.
Okay. And that kind of similar for you too, Subi? Is that?
Yeah, sometimes you do better when you dip into a different well that you've never like actually been into before. If you repeat the same thing, sometimes it becomes worse and worse. You always
The
want
water becomes mucky in the well.
Yeah. So sometimes it's better to like stretch yourself, not so much that you're like out of your comfort zone, but to your like challenging yourself.
Or
Okay.
especially if you
Yeah.
like have something in your life you can relate to that. Like if you have a lot of experience in something, even if it's not usually something you would write about, sometimes that works.
Great. So it can benefit you going outside the zone, but what you're also saying is that if it's too outside and you're not connected enough, it's probably going to lack the specificity. It needs to be really
Yeah.
powerful.
And
Okay.
especially in competitions, it's usually not a good idea to try like 5 new things at once. You want to kind of keep it.
Yes.
All right, that makes sense. So we gave you guys, or I gave you a prompt, and it was tell what the prompt was, and then let you guys can just go across and tell me what some of your ideas that you got rid of were, and then if you were really going to write this, is there one you would stick with?
All right. So the prompt was just the room, write a narrative based on that idea.
Okay.
So the idea that like first came to my mind that I didn't write down was it was about someone who had been kidnapped and was kept in a room. And I'm pretty sure I thought of that because there is a book and a movie called The Room where that is the entire storyline. That I was like, if I were in a competition, that's probably what a lot of other people would be writing about. So I have 3 ideas that I ended up staying with. So my first one was it was a prisoner of war who was taken during Pearl Harbor. American prisoner being held in Japan during World War II, who was being led to the execution room. The story was kind of the moments before that event. The second one was a little more lighthearted. It was a claustrophobic who accidentally locked herself in her bathroom. And she spent a lot of time trying to get out, but then ended up figuring out she was just opening the door the wrong way.
Oh, is that funny?
Oh,
Well, it's interesting to see your process because when you talk about brainstorming, you talk about the differences. Listen to the two differences.
yeah.
You've got a
Listen to
goofy
this
person
third
locking
one.
themselves in. Yeah, give us the third
but
one.
this third one's about an insane person.
Oh boy.
Who was placed in a circular cell in the asylum, but they are convinced that the room is a maze that just never ends, and they're just walking around the outer circle of this room, and throughout the story they just become more twisted and stuff. I'd love to see like a meeting of these three people.
Well, let me ask you this: of those three ideas, because they're really so different, did one of them speak to you, and how would you know which one to choose?
Whoa, okay.
You know, because when I hear those, I think, boy, there's potential with each one. Was even just in this because we do this all the time. Did you pick one that you think I could probably do this?
I would really like to do the Prisoner of War one, just because I feel like that would be really neat.
Okay.
I'm a history geek, and as much as I try to be funny in my writing, it's not as funny. I'm a very sarcastic person, and sarcasm just doesn't really come through in writing. It's like texting another person. Like you text what you think is funny, and then they end up taking like really bad offense to it. And you're like, no, I was actually kidding. But yeah. So the Prisoner of War one would actually be kind of cool.
Well, you hit on something else too, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is that write what you know. You don't always have to write what you know, because as soon as you say, write the things that you have knowledge of. You've never probably been to Mars. You've never probably, fought a dragon, but these are still really, believable prompts that you could write.
I once tried to write a story about a horse race, and I don't know anything about horses or horse races or races in that matter. So
How'd that one work out for you?
It seemed like a really good idea before, but
Sounds like you were trying to talk yourself into it. Well, that was excellent.
I spent too much time brainstorming, and this is the idea that I was like, well, okay.
Oh, it's so funny. Amy, what'd you come up with?
Okay, so this is mine. As you can see, my
Wow.
thinking's kind of messy. I never really realized how crazy my mind is until I tried to kind of draw it out for someone. But basically, I started thinking first, like, what emotions I could take it in. So I figured, like, it could probably go, like, a lot of sad ways, like being locked in a room or something. And so that was, again, like, kidnapping was one of the first ideas I had. Then I was thinking, like, it would probably be kind of harder to do a happy, but, like, you could go that way. And funny, like, obviously, you could have, like, a room full of, like, something surprising. Like, if you open the door and the room was full of marbles, you could do something like that. And then I was also thinking bitter, like, relationship breakup. I was going to one of the things I like to do is see if I can take a prompt in a more figurative way, because a lot of people won't think of that. So I was thinking maybe there could have been sort of room between people in a relationship or something like that, and see, like, I like to try to work the prompt in more than one way. So
Wonderful.
as you can see, I kind of flowed from idea to idea, and
I think that
had
idea.
a lot of strange things. Like, actually looking back here, I have somewhere written down hamburgers, and I'm not sure what that was supposed to mean.
Something got caught up in the brainstorm, apparently.
Some ideas,
She was
and
hungry.
yeah, well, and all of my ideas kind of, I was like, oh, but what if I did this? And I just kept going back to different. So my whole paper was just kind of filled with things I could possibly do. And eventually I kind of got down to, like, the most of my thoughts tended to lead towards here, which my final idea ended up being that a girl and her mom sort of had a lot of room between them in their relationship before, and they kind of weren't on the closest terms, and her mom died of cancer. And so about 2 weeks later, she finally gets up the courage to go back into her mom's bedroom, which had previously, when she was little, had kind of been like sort of a safe place for her. And then as her mom and her grew apart, it kind of wasn't anymore. It was kind of a place she didn't like anymore. And so she's finally going back into this room and kind of just wishing that, like, her mom could be there, and try to sometimes work it in more ways than one, so she could be kind of sitting in that room being like, I wish you could be here in this room with me.
That layering, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
I saw the writing you did on the back too. So it.
Yeah, usually as I brainstorm, actually I have a lot of things here. I tend to think of, like, one sentence from the story that I could put in, so I have, like, quotes there, and like.
I think another thing to talk about too is that the more you brainstorm, the better you get at it.
Yes.
And it turns into a muscle memory
Yeah.
thing where
Amy?
it's not quite as hard. Let me jump to Subi and see, what did you come up with, Subi?
Just like Amy, she kind of went with different directions as far as, like, emotions. I use it, like, just using that first word, like, the room. So I used room to, like, finish the sentence a little.
Got it.
So one direction I went was room keeps something secret or, like, hidden. Or you could go that way, or you could say that the room holds memories from the character's past, so you could tell the story based on like revealing their past. Or you could say that the room symbolizes something like a new beginning or the end of something old. Or I also had the figurative of like like space between like two people or two objects. Probably one of the first ones that came into mind was like a solution to a mystery. Like what a lot of people probably thought of that. I opened the door and there it was, you know. I also went the direction of personification. That's also really fun to do, like having the story be from two different perspectives, one from a human, one from something that's not living.
I consider telling the story from the point of view of the room. I thought that could be fun.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
Oh, that's a great approach.
Yeah. So I branched off of that from like plants, food, school supplies. Well, you know, like the perspective of a pen or paper or something. Just daily things that we always use and animals. So I went the other direction and did plants, like flowers and like just plants in general. They're like my thing. So I went from the perspective of a flower always being stuck in a room, but she was always by a window.
Ah.
And so she could see outside, but she could not see the whole like world around her, and she desperately wanted to like go outside. But then the girl who owned the plant always took care of her daily. She had a fear of going outside.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So they both had like differing perspectives and like
Wonderful.
the story would
I think the biggest one for sure that most people don't really even think of is to not brainstorm. Like a lot of people will go with the first idea because they're like, oh, that's good, I just thought of it, oh, I'm going to use that. And the problem is, again, it can be cliche, or sometimes when you get into brainstorming, you'll, like again, like your thoughts will kind of flow out and like you'll maybe build off that idea or have a better one entirely like come from the ideas. So I almost never go with my first idea unless I've spent a lot of time doing brainstorming and thinking of other ideas, and I always like if I just keep coming back to that one and I'm just like, that's a really good one. But a lot of people just go with the first idea immediately, so I think the biggest pitfall is not doing it.
Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there, now, as far as in conclusion, talking about in this video about brainstorming, what are the bullet points you would leave the writers with? What are things that you think are really important going forward as the writers watching this are going to go to competitions?
Well, as Amy literally just said 2 seconds ago, do not go with your first idea. Because that will usually be the idea everyone goes with. We all tend to think pretty similarly when it comes to just handing us a prompt. And so like with this one, like the room, I said like my first idea was someone being kidnapped and being trapped in a room.
Yeah,
A lot of other people.
Too, so.
Yeah. It's like 2 out of 3 people had that idea.
So before you start writing a story, make sure you have some general outline of the plot. Like make sure you know the beginning, middle, and end.
Great.
Some of the common pitfalls are like the writers start writing and then they have some like limited amount of time left during their writing, and they're like, oh wait, what am I gonna do for the end? And then they rush and then they write down something cliche. Or
You don't want to be too critical of your ideas either. Even if your first idea, you're like, oh, that's awful. Like you don't do that because that shuts off your creativity. Just keep going. Be like, well, how can I build off this? What other ideas can I think of? Just keep going.
Keep that internal sensor quiet.
And just keep taking it in different directions. Also, don't be afraid to keep brainstorming while you're writing, because I think almost all of my stories, I cross out the first paragraph because I start writing with this idea that I think is really good, and then there's just there's the sound of my ultimate failure as I just like scribble the whole thing out because I've hit on like a word or phrase or something that was just really powerful, and I'm like, wow, like I could take that this way, like something I didn't even think of. So sometimes if you're really stuck during brainstorming, sometimes you just have to start writing, and even if what you're writing, if you don't like that idea, just start writing until you get something that you're like that you can go with somewhere else.
It's a great point. Well, great. Thank you, ladies.